There's a moment in every man's life when he longs to be trusted. Not just respected or admired, but trusted. The kind of trust that lets someone exhale around you. The kind that says, I know you won't run away when things get hard. The kind that says, I can hand you my heart and it's not going to shatter in your silence. But the path to that kind of trust rarely begins with what most of us men think it does. See, it doesn't start with earning, right? It doesn't start with fixing, which we're so good at. It doesn't even start with consistency, which we're often blamed for not having. It begins with self-trust and the willingness to feel what's on the inside that's real. See, for many of us men, that's the part of ourselves that we've been taught to avoid at all costs. To feel deeply is to risk losing control. To feel fully is to risk falling apart. And so the escape routes begin for us. We get quiet, we get busy, we get analytical, we get logical. We oftentimes just get out. Not out of malice per se, and it's not out of cruelty either, but because somewhere along the way, emotions started feeling like threats. And self-abandonment began to feel like the only way that we could stay in control. But something else got lost when our feelings got buried. It wasn't just connection to ourselves, but it was also the ability to be present with others, the very presence that trust requires. See, when feelings are suppressed long enough, they don't just disappear. They begin to leak. They show up as sharpness in our tone. They show up as distraction in our eyes or as withdrawal in the middle of an important moment with someone. It shows up like inattention that feels like indifference or defensiveness that feels a lot like danger. And when that happens, trust begins to erode. And it's not because we didn't care. It's because we left the room internally. See, that's the fracture that I think she feels when nothing is said aloud. Now, she may not call it emotional avoidance. She may just say something like, something feels off, or something feels too quiet, or something feels too flat, or you're too much in your head, or like there's something that you're not saying, or something you're not letting yourself feel. And maybe she's right. I don't know. Maybe like underneath the calm exterior that we've been maintaining is this man inside that's holding his breath. A man that's afraid that if he really let himself feel, everything might crack open. That sadness might flood him, that anger might ruin him, or that grief might never let him go. But the truth is, what ruins a man is not what he feels, it's what he refuses to face. See, we can't build trust with someone else when we don't trust ourselves to stay present with our own pain. Does that make sense? Like, you can't offer emotional safety to someone when your first instinct is to silence what you're feeling. And it's not because you or I are bad, but because we've learned to fear our own inner world. And here's the turning point that most of us men never reach. What if emotional honesty isn't weakness? What if emotional honesty is actually a doorway to strength? Not strength as stoicism, not strength as control, but strength as rootedness, as steadiness, as the ability to remain grounded, even when the winds of sadness or conflict start to blow. That kind of strength doesn't come from being unaffected. It actually comes from being unafraid of our own affection, of our own depth, of our own pain, our tenderness. And it's easy to ask someone to trust us. But until we stop running from the parts of ourselves that feel, our presence will always have this hollow edge to it. It will always ring just slightly untrue. Not because we're insincere, but because we're not all the way there. And I think she can sense and feel that. She might not know how to name it perhaps, but she knows the difference between a man who's showing up emotionally and one who's disappearing behind the mask of stability. The heartbreaking thing, though, is that we might be trying our best. We might be doing everything that we were taught to do. But if the one thing that we're never taught is being ourselves, being with ourselves, our truth, our sadness, our doubt, then what we're offering, if we don't have these things, is incomplete. It's not that our reliability is what she needs. It's our emotional presence. It's the version of us who doesn't vanish at the first sign of emotional intensity. It's the version of ourselves who can actually sit with discomfort without trying to numb it. It's the version of us who can feel sadness without turning it into shame. A version of us who can meet our own feelings without asking someone else to carry them for us. That's, I think, what creates trust. It's not certainty, not perfection, not invincibility, but it's just emotional honesty. Just being real with ourselves as a starting point. See, most of us men have never been taught what to do with our own pain. We were never told we were told to rise above it and to push through it and to be rational and strong and to be productive. But there was no invitation to actually sit with that sadness. There was no guidance for us for moving through shame, right? There was no safety to say, gosh, I feel so lost today. So instead of learning how to be with these feelings, many of us learn how to override these feelings. And over time, this became a default setting, a quiet contract with ourselves that says, feeling deeply makes me unreliable. Or if I start feeling, I might never stop. Or if I admit these hurts, I'm going to lose my edge. And yet something in the soul knows better, doesn't it? There's something deeper that is calling. It's not louder, but it's truer. Because even if emotional shutdown helped us survive before, it's not going to help us build intimacy now. See, what protected us back then, this is the very thing that might be keeping love out for us today. And trust, like real trust, it only grows in spaces where our full selves are welcome. Not just the composed parts of ourselves, not just the strategic or the impressive parts of ourselves, but the conflicted parts, the confused parts, the parts that are crying behind closed doors, and then wiping the mirror before anyone sees. That's the part that she needs to know exists. Not because she wants to fix it, but because she wants to analyze it. Because if she's going to trust you with her pain, she needs to know that you've also met your own pain first. See, it's not about being perfectly emotionally articulate. Instead, it's about being emotionally available. Because presence isn't something that we can fake. It's either embodied or it isn't. And if we haven't practiced staying with our own pain, we'll flinch when someone else brings theirs to the table. See, we'll pull away when they get emotional, and we'll change the subject when vulnerability shows up. And we'll instinctively try to fix what we were never meant to fix. Because feelings with them, feels so intolerable. And that's not like a lack of love. It's a lack of capacity that we have. And that capacity can be built. But it starts by noticing the moments that we leave ourselves. It's that subtle urge to check your phone during a tense pause, for example, or the quick move to logic when something vulnerable or tender is said. The depression in our chest when our partner says, I don't feel seen by you. See, these are not just reactions. These are clues. They point to the parts of ourselves that have never actually been given space to breathe. Trust does not require us to be a therapist, okay? But it does ask us to be present. That's it. But presence requires feeling. Not the chaotic kind that takes over a room, but the honest kind that actually knows how to stay seated in the fire. See, when you stop running from your own fear, you stop being afraid of someone else's. When you stop silencing your sadness, you begin to hear hers differently, more clearly, more patiently. And suddenly trust isn't something that we ask for, it's something that we become. Because when we trust our own emotions, somehow we radiate a quiet sort of safety. We don't flinch when life gets real. We don't retreat into our strategies when intimacy starts deepening. And we don't need to be rescued from our own discomfort. And that more than any romantic gesture or confident tone that we might presume, is what makes someone say, I can trust you. And it's not because we know everything, but it's because it's because we were honest enough to stay in that moment. Not just with her, but also with ourselves. It's not that we men don't feel. We do feel. It's more so that the world gave us very few places where feelings were welcome. It wasn't in school, it wasn't on the sports team, not at work, not even in our homes. And so over time, our bodies adapted. And our bodies learned to tighten instead of to tremble. And our bodies learned to solve instead of to speak, to carry instead of to cry. And it became far easier to intellectualize our pain rather than to sit inside of it. Easier to explain what happened than to express what it actually did to us. See, this adaptation is survival, and it comes with a cost. The body stores what our mouths won't name. And one day when love finally comes and arrives, we don't know how to let it in, because real love, it touches the parts of ourselves that have not been touched in years. Not physically, but emotionally and energetically and honestly. And that kind of contact can feel more threatening than comforting, because it asks us to trust. Trust not her, but to trust ourselves. To trust that our feelings won't ruin that moment. To trust that our anger won't explode like our fathers did. To trust that our sadness won't make us weak. To trust that our confusion won't make us unworthy. And for many of us men, that trust has not been built yet. And so instead of letting ourselves feel, we perform strength instead. We control what they say. We offer logic instead of presence, and we stay calm but disconnected, and we appear grounded but we're really distant. And the women in our lives feel this gap, not because we men are cruel, but because we're absent. We're present in body, yes, but not in actual presence. And eventually the relationship starts to feel like a house with no furniture. Like everything's technically there, yes, but but nothing feels lived in. And conversations feel safe, but shallow. And conflict never explodes, but nothing really gets resolved. And intimacy exists, but it's never deepening. And slowly trust becomes a formality instead of a felt reality. And she says, I trust you, but what she means is, I know that you won't cheat. I know you won't yell at me. I know you will show up on time. But here's what she doesn't feel. She can't say, I can fall apart with you, or I can be messy around you, or I can show you the parts of me that I haven't even shown myself. And here's what makes this so complicated. The men, we may be doing our absolute best. We may be loyal, we may be attentive, we may be supportive, but if we're still hiding from ourselves, there's a part of us that can never be truly known. And trust requires knowing, not just the facts, but our feelings, not just our childhood story or the political beliefs that we have or a 5-year plan. It needs to be able to access the emotional underbelly beneath, the soft, raw, hidden parts within ourselves. But this is a paradox. You see, the part of us, the one that we've worked so hard to hide, this is a part that actually earns her trust when we're willing to show that. Not our accomplishments, not our composure, not even our cleverness, but it's our emotional transparency, our ability to say, this is what's real for me right now. I'm scared, but I'm staying. I'm hurt, but I won't hide behind silence this time. These are the kind of statements that open people up. That's what creates a kind of trust that doesn't need to be spoken because it is felt. And it's not something that we prove once, right? It's something that we practice again and again and again. We practice it by checking in with ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable, right? We practice it by naming our emotions because they're going to leak out sideways. So by catching ourselves when we start to shut down and coming back to honesty, this is what builds more trust. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about coming home to the parts of us that have been waiting to be felt. Because when these parts are no longer strangers, it's then that we stop being a stranger to her as well. See, there's a different kind of strength that most of us men haven't been taught to value. It's not the strength to lift something heavy, right? And it's not the strength to stay calm under pressure. You know, it's not even the strength to hold it all together when things fall apart. But it's the strength to stay present, especially when everything inside of us wants to run away. The strength to feel what's true instead of what's convenient. The strength to not turn away from the hard parts of our story. The strength to say, this matters, and I'm not going to numb or dismiss it or even run away from this. This is the strength that actually builds trust, because the moment that someone sees that you can be with yourself, that's the moment that they start to believe that you can also be with them as well. Presence, after all, is not measured by stillness. It's measured by availability. Like, can someone reach me when they need me emotionally? Can they tell the difference between my quiet and my withdrawal, for example? Can they trust when I go silent, it's not going to be a shutdown, but more so like a reflection? These things are only possible when we can trust ourselves, when we don't see our emotions as the enemy, when we understand that anger isn't danger, and that sadness is not a failure, and that confusion doesn't make us weak. Most of us men never got that lesson. And as a result, we built emotional fortresses instead of relationships. And we mistook invulnerability for trustworthiness. And we put all that energy into into seeming unshakable, when connection is the willingness to be shaken without leaving that space. See, we don't build trust by never being afraid. We build it by being honest about the fear that we're experiencing and then choosing to stay open anyways. And that's what safety feels like. It doesn't feel like perfection nor predictability, but truth that doesn't abandon itself when it gets uncomfortable. Now, this applies in small moments as well. The way that we respond when she's upset, right? The way that we handle disappointment, the way that we apologize when we've misstepped. Not just to move on, but because we actually felt the impact of what happened to her. This is how emotional trust is built, brick by brick, moment by moment, through micro moments of truth, through returning to the conversation after our guard goes up, through naming what's real instead of suppressing and burying it. And none of this is possible if we are at war with our own emotions. Because the man who refuses to feel he'll always be creating distance. Even when he's trying to build closeness, he'll say all the right things, but something just isn't landing. And it's not because he's being dishonest, but because he's disconnected. And the people closest to him will feel that disconnection. They may not call it emotional avoidance, but they'll say things like, I don't feel like you're here with me. Or it feels like there's something you're not quite saying. Or you're here, but you're really not here. Or I'm talking, but I don't know if you're actually hearing me. Or it feels like you disappear right when I need you most. And I mean, hearing those things, that hurts. Not just to these men, but to all of us. But deep down, we want to be trustworthy. We want to be present. We want to be known, don't we? But that presence doesn't come from effort. It comes from integration. We have to be with ourselves before anyone else can be with us fully. And that means feeling what's here, even if it's messy or uncomfortable or unfamiliar. See, there's no shortcut. I wish I could offer you one, but there's no shortcut. But there is this way forward. And we begin by practicing honesty internally first. See, when something stings, then we should say so. When we feel fear, we need to name it. When we shut down, we need to notice it and then come back. When we're overwhelmed, we don't need to pretend otherwise. We simply need to let ourselves be seen by ourselves first. And in so doing, we begin to build trust from the inside out. It's this kind of trust that doesn't say, I won't hurt you, but it says, I'm not going to disappear from myself. And so I'm not also going to disappear from you either. Trust, it doesn't come from promises. It comes from presence. And presence only becomes possible when we stop hiding from ourselves. See, that's the secret at the root of every fractured relationship, I believe. It's not bad intentions. It's not a lack of love, but it's us men who've been taught to fear our own feelings. And what we fear, what we avoid, well, we can't hold it if we avoid it. And then we can't hold anyone else's either. This is how intimacy breaks down. That's how trust disappears. It's not because anyone meant to cause harm, but because we never learned how to stay emotionally, how to stay honestly, how to stay with what's uncomfortable under the radar here. And yet, this is our turning point. This is the moment of possibility, the beginning of a new kind of manhood that we could experience. Not the kind that avoids softness in the name of strength, not the kind that avoids sadness in the name of stoicism, not the kind that avoids connection in the name of control, but the kind that's actually willing to feel, the kind that knows the real safety does not come from shutting down, but it comes from showing up, the kind that doesn't run away from shame, but learns how to move through it so that shame no longer runs our show. The kind that knows emotional truth is not a threat. It's actually a path to trust. So it's one thing to say, I want her to trust me, but it's an entirely another thing to live in a way that makes that trust possible. And let me tell you, it always starts here on the inside, because until our emotions are no longer a danger to ourselves, we'll never be a sanctuary for someone else, anyone else for that matter. So the question becomes this: what parts of yourself still feel unsafe to feel? What emotion do you still treat like a threat? Or what truth do you keep suppressing and pushing down because you're afraid of what it says about you? This is where the work is. Not in becoming someone else, but in actually returning to the parts of yourself that you've abandoned so long ago. Because the man who can sit with his sadness will never be afraid of her sadness. The man who knows how to breathe through his anger, he'll never need to control hers. And the man who can actually feel his guilt without turning it into shame will know how to repair instead of retreat, like he always did. And the man who can hold himself in the dark, he becomes the man who can actually be trusted in the light. Not because he's perfect, and not because he's present. So stop asking whether you're trustworthy. Instead, ask whether you're with yourself when the moment gets hard or difficult or challenging. When the conversation hits a nerve, do you stay? When you feel insecure, do you listen? When you're overwhelmed, do you tend to shut down, or do you soften? See, these are the moments that matter, because these moments shape how we are experienced ourselves. Not in grand gestures, but in our tiny choices to stay emotionally available even when we feel exposed. That's where trust is built. That's where connection deepens. That's where love gets rooted. Not in the absence of discomfort, but in the presence of someone who actually knows how to stay real in the middle of it all. This is the invitation to you, not to fix everything overnight, but to stop fleeing away from the parts of you that feel. Because when you make peace with your own emotional world, it's then that you stop being a stranger to the people who love you. And you stop being unknowable, and you stop being unpredictable. You stop being emotionally vague. And instead you start being felt. You start being safe and trusted and chosen. Not because you asked for all this, but because finally you became all these things. And I hope you get to experience such a hemisphere. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions that I could clarify. And I'd love to hear experiences that this episode may have triggered for you and how you're processing them.